Telecommunications play a vital role in the process of development, worldwide, regional and national. It is in the context of the individual country, each country, that telecommunication infrastructures to meet the needs of the population are designed and constructed for national objectives. That is why the Administrative Council of the International Telecommunication Union adopted the theme of Telecommunications in the Service of Nations for World Telecommunication Day 1987. For it is indeed a service that is involved, a service which affects all the activities of every nation. Telecommunications link together the capital with the regional or local centres, as well as the urban with the rural and remote areas. Telecommunications represent an indispensable tool for the social, cultural and economic development of states. In addition to two-way telecommunications, well-sited sound broadcasting and television stations also provide a national medium for public information, instruction and entertainment. It must be emphasised, however, that the development of these services is dependent on government policy, appropriate consideration and priority in the national planning context. Development calls for adequate resources, financial and human. The International Telecommunication Union has for some years past studied ways and means of accelerating these requirements through international cooperation. Measures have been taken to contribute to accelerate the development of the telecommunication networks in all countries, and particularly in those with inadequate infrastructures. If the recommendations made at the international level can be put into effect, it may reasonably be hoped that the year 2000 will see substantive progress. Every inhabitant of our planet should be having, in practice, access to basic telecommunication facilities, telephone and broadcasting services with all the advantages they offer. This is certainly an ambitious target, but it is not beyond our reach, given the determination on the part of every one of the member states, coupled with the spirit of active cooperation that exists between them. It can be achieved.
Paris, 17th of May, 1865. The plenipotentiaries of 20 states, moved by the wish to establish a permanent understanding among themselves, signed the International Telegraph Convention, creating the International Telegraph Union, later to become the International Telecommunication Union. At this time, the industrialization of certain regions of the world called for increasingly reliable and swift communications. Although the telegraph was already widely used within many states, the creation of a genuinely international telegraph network came up against a man-made barrier, the national frontiers, at which the telegraph wires usually ended. The International Telegraph Convention of 1865 therefore provided measures aimed at overcoming this obstacle and promoting the development of a worldwide network. As the first intergovernmental treaty applicable to a public service, the convention, to which every sovereign state was at liberty to accede, contained the concept of universality, which was to become an inspiration for the action of the countries members of the Union. The first stage consisted in the standardization of operating and accounting methods from amongst the different technical possibilities. Every major innovation in communications was swiftly matched by specific union action to make use of the new discovery in the world network. The history of the ITU in this respect reflects that of the technological development of telecommunications.
Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you.
For example, the invention of the telephone in the 1870s led to the adoption at Berlin in 1885 of the first regulations governing the International Telephone Service.
Very well done.
The invention of radiotelegraphy at the end of the last century led to the signing of the International Radio Telegraph Convention at Berlin in 1906. In the 1920s, the introduction of new services such as broadcasting and the growing complexity of the techniques employed prompted the countries members of the Union to allocate the frequency bands and to set up consultative committees to prepare international standards. At Madrid in 1932, the plenipotentiaries of the Union emphasized the universality of telecommunications by deciding to merge the International Telegraph and Radio Telegraph Conventions in a single International Telecommunication Convention and to rename the organization the International Telecommunication Union. Closer to our own times, the intensive use of radio communications necessitated the creation of an international board to manage the frequency spectrum. The dawn of the space age in 1957 impelled the Union to adopt regulations for the space service. A worldwide integrated network was thus gradually constituted through the will of the ITU member countries, accompanied by the affirmation of the concept of universal telecommunications at the service of every member of the human community. This evolution was greatly assisted by the decision of the plenipotentiaries meeting at Atlantic City in 1947 to make the Union the United Nations Specialized Agency for Telecommunications. Having become part of a large pattern, the ITU actively cooperated with the other specialized agencies in implementing the United Nations Development Programme. Design and installation of national and regional networks, training and the preparation of plans, particularly for radio communication services, intended to safeguard the legitimate interests of all countries regardless of their technical capacity at any given time. ITU action now recognized the role of telecommunications as a key to social and economic development. This role was reflected in the work of the 10th ITU Plenipotentiary Conference held in Nairobi in 1982, which, as the very preamble to the convention signed by the member countries affirms, took its decisions having regard to the growing importance of telecommunication for the preservation of peace and the social and economic development of all countries. Thus, the Nairobi Conference marked a turning point in the history of the Union, which, while continuing regulation, standardization, coordination and planning activity, also committed itself to the task of redressing the enormous imbalances in telecommunications development. For this purpose, the plenipotentiaries set up an independent commission of 17 wise men representing all continents and with the assignment of producing specific proposals designed to put an end to this unacceptable situation. Proposals whose importance was stressed by the ITU Secretary General, to whom they were submitted in 1985.
If these proposals, which might serve as a point of departure for both the international community and the national authorities, are implemented without delay, they could reverse the general trend. They could give everyone on the planet, whatever the region, access to at least distance communication, that is to say by telephone, during the next 20 years to the mutual benefits of all communities and nations. In this way, 1985, the year of the 120th anniversary of our Union, under the watchword of telecommunications for development, could also go down in the history as a real starting point of the age of universal telecommunications.